Today we're going to start talking about this Sermon on the Mount passage, these blessings that are often called the Beatitudes, starting out as the starting point of Jesus' most famous sermon. So what does it mean to be blessed? When you hear that, how does that work for you? So in this Sermon on the Mount, where we're starting into this passage, Jesus has already been beginning some of his ministry, and this is his starting point. This is his main preaching message that he will then go and embody afterwards. It will also show up in the Gospel of Luke in chapter 6 in a very similar way. That's called the Sermon on the Plain. So, okay, blessing. Someone says, bless you. What does that mean to you? Maybe it means you've just sneezed. If you're anywhere in the South, if they say bless you, it's not something polite. They're judging you in some way. Later today we'll sing bless the Lord. What does that even mean? Language ends up being a little bit different. The challenge with blessing is it's used in so many different ways that when we read it in the Bible, we can sometimes be unsure of exactly what it's saying. The word that we get blessing from has a variety of meaning. In some of our translations, we'll see it as happy. Happy are those. Sometimes we'll see it as wonderful news. Jesus is announcing, this is wonderful news for people who are like this. There's this implication that the people that Jesus is saying are blessed are the people who are a part of this kingdom that he's talking about, this kingdom of heaven in some way. If you're blessed, you're part of this group. There's also implications sometimes as a blessing means you are wise. Wise are those who. Or maybe those who are blessed are the ones who are empowered by God. God empowers them to go and to be a part of this kingdom. Maybe the best way to read blessed in Jesus' statements here is to recognize that Jesus is saying that God's favor is upon these people in some way, which for us will be interesting because it's not just that these people are blessed, but they're blessed always with a purpose. Whenever there's blessing, there's a purpose to this blessing, an action. Jesus' message here in this Sermon on the Mount, that's Matthew 5 through 7, is about this upside-down kingdom, this different type of kingdom. Basically, Jesus is saying the way the world is wrong, and I'm here to twist it right. So if any of you have seen the TV show Stranger Things, and I say TV show because is it even a TV show if it's on Netflix? There's this science fiction show, and in it, the basis is that everyone is living in the normal world, but underneath our world, there is a dark version called the upside down, where things are dark, things are deadly, things are bad in this upside down world. It's this twisted, dark mirror version of our reality. What Jesus is saying is that we actually live in the upside down. We are in this twisted, dark version of reality, and he is inviting us to see things the right way up, the way things are meant to be. Because our world has been distorted. This good creation of God has been distorted with sin and pain and death. And maybe the only way we can see the world properly is to turn upside down and to see it through the eyes of Jesus. Because Jesus is an upside down kind of king. His throne is a cross, his crown is thorns, and he will die for the people who hate him, who murder him, and forgive them. Jesus invites his followers to this type of upside-down living that looks very different than the way maybe we would expect blessing to work in our world. So today, as we start looking at this first section, which is called the Beatitudes, that's just taken from the Latin root word that means blessed. We're going to look at just that first part, because there's so much going on that if I tried to do everything, we would be here for a very long time. So we're going to look at this first section, which deals with humility. So the introduction section here says, now when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him and he began to teach them. Okay, this is an innocuous, very quick beginning, but there's some important things for us to catch. The first bit is that Jesus sees the crowds. He's not just seeing that crowds are following. This implication here that he sees and he understands who they are. As he gives this message, it is a message that is designed not just for them, but it is a message to let them know that they are a part of something that they don't even know they're a part of. He sees them and loves them where they are. It invites them into the story. The mountainside is an important image always in the Bible, and here, very clearly, Matthew is giving us this vision of Moses coming down from the mountain with these laws, with these 10 commandments. But now Jesus is going up on the mountainside as this new Moses figure to go and to show us these commandments of God. Instead of a list of things to do and not to do, character traits of those who are a part of God's kingdom. And I love that Jesus sits down. This is how teachers would teach in that time at the temple, but also in sitting down, he's up so they can see him and hear him, but he's not towering over them, looking down on them like a preacher up in his pulpit, looking and judging you like this. As best I can. Jesus sits down, he's this leveling, this gentleness, and he's teaching his disciples. So there's kind of this inside group, but this whole crowd of people that can come and hear as well. And then Jesus continues in verse 3. He said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth." Okay. These double statements all through here. So let's look at what this is getting at. In a lot of ways, this all has to do with humility, this humble living. And I love this quote from C.S. Lewis, which isn't really a quote from C.S. Lewis. Don't believe everything you read on the internet, as always, but does summarize C.S. Lewis's view on humility. It says, "It's not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less." Thinking of others. And Jesus talks about the poor in spirit, and this is confusing, because what does it mean to be poor in spirit? In Luke, when the same passage occurs, Luke just says the poor. So there's something about this that means being economically challenged, being economically stressed and poor. But in spirit implies even more. It's both being economically challenged, but also being poor in spirit means that we long and we trust that God can do things that we can't. We're poor in spirit because we recognize we don't have all the answers and can't do it all, so we have to trust in God. And Jesus talks about this kingdom of heaven. And that's strange to us, because when we see the word heaven, what do we think of? Something way up in the sky that happens after we die. But Jesus is talking about something that's happening right there in their midst, this kingdom of heaven or kingdom of God. Matthew uses heaven instead of saying God's name. This different type of living, this invitation to a different reality and a different king. And then Jesus talks about those who mourn as being blessed. For those of us who have ever had to mourn something, whether the loss of a friend, the loss of a lifestyle and work, any pain in our lives, we recognize that that's not really a blessed time, is it? But here Jesus says those who mourn are blessed, those who strive and desire for this world to be separated from the death and the pain and the oppression that it is under. Those who long for this fullness of God's kingdom, who are mourning and wanting more, that those are the ones who will be comforted. They will be blessed because God is doing something about that. That God is at work to go and to take that upside down and put it right side up. And then Jesus talks about the meek. Now, meekness isn't really something that people strive for in our society. Meek is most often used as an insult, maybe feeling kind of mousy. But meekness has to do with this humility, this gentleness towards others. And then we see inherit the earth. So meekness and inheriting the earth are important because when we think earth, we think from space. But for them, it's inheriting the land. There is this land of promise that in their time has been taken over by the Roman army. How do we take that back? Well, with force. We're going to take it back with force, and they'll try that many times. But the Roman army is very powerful, not so easily dissuaded from the area. You see the meek inherit the land and gain the land, not by force, not through violence, not through battle, but through this gentleness, through loving even their enemies, through this peaceful non-resistance that we have seen change nations, but is very difficult to put our faith in. You see, this meekness, this humility, this mourning, this poor in spirit is very much what Jesus will talk about later in this message as in his prayer, so that we'll start to see it on earth as it is in heaven. God's promises aren't just for some future time after we pass away and God invites us into the beyond. It's for the kingdom to come now, to be embodied now, for that hope to come now through God's people and community. See, the trouble for us in this is that that's not how we see blessed, is it, in our world? Blessed are the rich, for they have it all. Blessed are the comfortable, because they don't have to worry about all the things going on in their lives. When we look at this picture, where we see one person who is doing fairly well and another person who is struggling, we have no doubt who the real blessed person is, do we? God's turning this all upside down, though, saying that, there's something about being on the bottom that God sees as blessed and being in favor of. And the kingdom of heaven for us, as we've talked about, is this challenge to see as something that exists now. We like the idea where faith is something where we say a prayer, and we get a get out of hell free card, right? When we pass go, we don't have to worry about it. And then we go to this happy heaven later. Whereas Jesus' heaven is something that is occurring. Jesus' kingdom is something that is infiltrating the earth. It is happening here in our midst. That's hard for us to imagine. Because if we're honest, strength is always better than weakness. Strength is what wins. Weakness and meekness is what loses in our world. But our hope is in Jesus, the one giving us this message. Because Jesus doesn't just preach this message, he embodies it. He shows the way in his actions. Because Jesus is humble. Jesus is the one who will get down on his knees and do the worst job, washing someone else's feet like a servant, so that his followers know that they too will serve others. Jesus will show us that humility isn't weakness. It is true strength. It is what God calls strength. And with Jesus, he's not just pretending that everything is fine in the midst of a broken world. Pain isn't ignored. Mourning isn't ignored. Instead, it is something that Jesus comes right alongside into the midst with us. Ours is a God that walks through those dark valleys with us, who has been there before and will go there again and will weep along with us. We see Jesus as someone who is blessed, who has God's favor upon him, not for his own sake, not so he can go and be some kingly ruler, not so that everything ends well for Jesus, because it doesn't. It does eventually. But in the midst there's pain and brokenness. Jesus is blessed for the sake of others. He's blessed for our sake. Okay, so what does this mean for us? Well, will we trust that Jesus is telling the truth? Will we trust that Jesus' version of reality is the true reality, in spite of what goes on around us in the world? Will we be those who mourn over the brokenness of the world, who long and perfectly long to see that changed, and who go across the street and make a difference in the lives of our neighbors in such a way that they start to experience healing? Will we serve as Jesus served? Will we recognize that what we have been blessed with isn't just for our sake? It's not just for us to hold on to, but it's for us to pass on to bless others. That we, as God's people, are called to be the kingdom come, to be God's will be done right here in St. Catherine's, right here in our world, bringing healing gently and meekly. humbly bringing the love of Jesus to each person we meet, to each person we bump into. Friends, will we follow the Jesus way? This upside-down way. And that is what we are invited into. To do justly, to walk humbly, to love mercy, the way of Jesus. All right, we do still have some time for some questions. If you have any questions out of there, as a reminder, whoever goes first gets to choose if they want a Twix bar. Blessed are those who ask the first question.